of the Mercury News, who covers the Golden State Warriors, does a hell of a job down there, and she was down there in Las Vegas. And this is what Joe Lacob had to tell Madeline Kenny. Quote, "There's no such thing as the two timelines. There never was, and still isn't, and never will be. There's only one timeline, and the timeline is every year to put the best product on the floor, to have the best team, to compete the best you can to win a championship." All right, he says that to Madeline Kenny. Here's what he said a year ago with Tim Kawakami.
People criticized me and us, some people did, for the, quote, dual timeline. Why would you?
Two timelines. It's a two timelines.
Two timelines. Now everyone thinks it's brilliant, because we won. I would think the fans, and like us, we don't want to have a span of 5 or 10 years where we're not good. We want to try to win championships. We did it. We're going to try to do it again this year. And at the same time, develop young players who can eventually, continue to take more and more minutes as the older guys start to take less of a role.
All right, Joey. Well, clearly you were talking about two timelines there. So kind of talking with your foot in your mouth there to Madeline Kenny just a few days ago. Joe, your thoughts on the backpedaling or non-backpedaling and just removing it from all of his thought, and Joe Lacob going back and not saying, actually, there never was two timeline approach. Your thoughts on that whole thing?
Let's call a spade. Joe, you did. And what I would say is they went a little overboard. I have no problem. I think that there's this misconception that you can't play young players and try to win. Did you see who the shortstop was on the World Series winning champion Astros?
Pena?
Yeah.
He's a baller.
Yeah, he was the ALCS MVP.
Yeah.
Now, could they have 4 guys out there that are super, super young? Well, Yordan Alvarez is now becoming a veteran.
Yeah.
Tucker's now becoming a veteran. But they've implemented young players over the years. And it's worked out really well for them. And they've lost a lot of guys in free agency. That's baseball. Baseball does tend to be different.
Yes.
Okay, so I acknowledge that. Football, there are more roster spots. It tends to be different. Yes. You could play an all-rookie secondary and win the Super Bowl in 1981. Yes. Okay? You can incorporate a Charles Haley, a Tom Rathman, a Brent Jones, Harris Barton in 1987 to a veteran-laden Joe Montana-led team. Yeah. You can do that and still have unbelievable success, right? In basketball, I think it tends to be trickier. Had they just had, let's just say hypothetically, Jordan Poole, I think it would have been easier to navigate the waters for the Warriors if it was just Jordan Poole as the lone young guy. Hey, I could even make an argument it would have been easier if it was just Kuminga in Jordan Poole or just Kuminga and Moody.
Yeah.
When you have Ryan Rollins, Patrick Baldwin Jr., James Wiseman, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Jordan Poole, I think it's just too many.
Yeah.
And I think where they got caught is there were too many youngsters. Not that there was youngsters. There were too many of them.
Yeah, and they were afraid to let them fail. I think it always comes back to with the young guys because you're coming off a championship and you're talking about this two timeline thing. Oh, we're going to dominate now and dominate in the future, and you're selling all this positivity now in the future. And I get it. That's what any good business does, right? You're developing now, then for the future. And it actually kind of gets into the running back conversation we'll get into a little bit later, what's going on with some of these franchise tags and not getting picked up from the Tony Pollards, Saquons, the Josh Jacobs, because franchises are looking on the future and they're not going to pay you for what you did in the past. I get that. But when it comes to the Golden State Warriors, you got to look at the future. And the future after Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson may not be the best if you're not playing these guys early on. So it is a very interesting quote, and I get it. Joe Lacob, he's a billionaire, right? These guys don't like to admit when they're wrong, Joe. They don't like to admit that ever when they're wrong because they've made decisions that have gotten to where they are today that were right every single step of the way. And now they've had mistakes, they've had hiccups, but what do? They right those wrongs pretty quickly, and that's what they did this past season with the James Wiseman. There's all the writing on the wall. It's not working. Let's go get Gary Payton II. So I commend them on that.
But Joey, and I want to pause you right there. I'll let you finish in a second. We also have to acknowledge whether the rookies were big or minimal impact on that season, they did win the championship the year prior.
Yes.
So their belief
in
how they assembled the team.
Jordan Poole was a big part of that. And he wasn't a rookie, I get it, but he was a huge part of that championship run.
Like their belief in like incorporating rookies it kind of panned out for them. Now, you could say, Joe, the rookies didn't have that big of an impact, and you're probably right. Like, I'll acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Jordan Poole was really young, and he really helped them.
Yes.
I don't think they win the title in 2021 without Jordan Poole. That is just the way I view it.
Do you think they would have won a title last year had they, been more eager to play Kuminga and Moody and let them fail early on in the season?
No, I think what ended up happening was they doubled down on this belief that they could balance all of these things simultaneously. And to me, they barely balanced it the year prior and then went deeper into it because you added Ryan Rollins, you added PBJ, you had to reincorporate James Wiseman back in. And to me, it was just a couple too many. And that's where we're at. This isn't some sweeping indictment. I believe that the actual thought process of having a youngster or two incorporated in with the old guys, that makes a lot of sense. I just think they went a little too far.
So does this quote, and you're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, always live on the free Odyssey app. Download the Odyssey app and favorite 95.7 The Game for the best and most up-to-date sports coverage. Don't forget that you can also watch us every single day on our YouTube and Twitch streams. Just log on and search 95.7 The Game. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel while you are there. And we have a poll question up right now on YouTube. The question, would you be okay with your favorite team tanking? No at 76%. And the question I want, coming off that quote with Joe Lacob talking about the two timelines, there's never been two timelines, although a year ago he said there was with Tim Kawakami. We just played the sound there for you there. Does this mean that Kuminga and Moody are no longer safe from being moved from this team going forward? You think they're solidified roster spots? Like this year, let's say they're in the 6th spot in the West, and they have some decisions to make in regards to Chris Paul going forward, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. They're clearly going all in on this core three of Steph, Dre, and Klay Thompson. Do you think that Kuminga and Moody are safe? Because for the longest time, we felt like they were Joe Lacob's guys, but is Joe Lacob now seeing the writing on the wall? Like, listen, I got these 3 years left with Steph, Dre, and Klay. I got to maximize all that. And if that's moving on from the young guys, so be it. Because for the longest time, it felt like James Wiseman was never going to be moved because he was a Joe Lacob type of guy. Well, they moved him last year.
Look, I have no idea. This isn't great answers for
no,
sports
it's fine.
radio.
No, it's but
I got no clue.
Yeah, no. Okay.
If I were to bet today, I would bet one of the two is off the roster a year from now.
Okay.
Kuminga or Moody. One is going to play a factor. The other one's going to be moved. Okay. I mean, they just drafted a guy, PBJ, and in less than 12 months traded him away.
Yeah, no. It's a good
We
point.
didn't even see him.
No. And that was some money. That was some value in there, obviously.
Well, and then they added two other guys. That's another part of this. They added a guy yesterday in Jerome Robinson who nobody could spot in a lineup. No one knows who that guy is.
Probably. Yes.
But like right now, I think everyone's going to crush Joe Lacob, and I understand the backtracking, and he has changed course. Like that, the reality is you did try to do two timelines, and I don't fault you for it. Like I will defend them for that. Name me a team in sports that isn't trying to incorporate some young guys to a winning atmosphere. And name me a business that there's a reason apprentices exist with foremen and journeymen on a construction site. You need some cost-controlled labor. I understand that. I would say you had too many apprentices and not enough journeymen.
Well, that's the thing. And the greatest of the great franchises are able to thread that needle so tightly, and you have to get some luck along the way, right? You think of the San Antonio Spurs. They got Kawhi Leonard. That changed everything.
Yes.
And I'm sure the Warriors are hoping that Jonathan Kuminga could be even close to that. Hell, I'm not saying it's going to be Kawhi Leonard. Like, Kawhi Leonard is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. They're just hoping that Kuminga could be an all-star, right? That's just the first step. Can you be an all-star? Can you be a rotational type of player? Hell, can you be a sixth man? That's what we want for this team. Because I do believe, Joe, if Moses Moody or Jonathan Kuminga, just one of those guys, take that next step.
Yes.
I think that changes everything for this team in this squad. I think that makes them not the favorites in the West, but I put them right on par with the Denver Nuggets. Absolutely. If Jonathan Kuminga turns into, hell, maybe even, I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but a sixth-man type of guy for the Warriors, and you get that trust with Steve Kerr, absolutely I'm saying they got a shot. Absolutely. They need one of those guys, though. Yeah, bold take, I know. Moses Moody or Kuminga needs to make a jump for this team going forward.
Well, I think that
to win a title, I believe.
No, I'm with you with that. I also think that there's a financial component to this, which it's more restrictive in the NBA than it is, let's say, Joe's Cafe. You know, Joe's Cafe is trying to run. You can't have a roster at the cafe of all managers. right?
No.
But also, you can't have a bunch of baristas. You got to have at least a manager or two. You need to have some, hierarchy, if you will, but you also have to have some cost control,
Yes.
right? Like, there's a reason when you go to Whole Foods, they've got a bunch of part-time workers. It's for cost control.
Absolutely.
And then they also have a store manager, and then they've got some people that are, higher up on the food chain, and they're trying to blend that, A, because it's financially stable, and B, because it creates a really good work environment. You're trying to develop some of those baggers into checkers.
There you go.
And you're going to try to get those checkers into cashiers and into management at some point. That's what every business in America is trying to do.
I started out as a seasonal employee back at Michael's Craft Store in Emeryville. Shout out Michael's, where creativity happens. Back in 2013, and I stayed on. They kept me. I moved my way up, and then I was a nights and weekends manager. I was making some pretty good pay doing that. So I just worked my way up through there.
Exactly.
Basically, all I did was show up and just do my job. That was it. In retail, that shows how low the bar is. But to your point, that's what it needs to be. You need to be showing up. You need to be available. You need to do all this sort of stuff. You need to do all the grit and grind. And maybe Kuminga, maybe he was salty here and there. Moses, I'll say credit for him. He stayed ready. He understood the assignment. But again, you got to be willing to let these guys fail. Like, I failed multiple times, and I'm not sit here trying to compare a retail employee to professional athletes.
But I think there's some metaphors.
But there's metaphors. We're trying to just absolutely.
But wouldn't you acknowledge this? Last year,
shout out Michaels,
was an unequivocal failure on a variety of fronts.
It was a tremendous failure. They're the defending NBA champions, and they didn't even get back to the conference finals.
So pivoting from your old stances isn't the worst thing. In fact, if anything, pivoting and going in a different direction is probably the prudent thing to do if you want to win again.
I think it was just funny with Joe Lacob just not even acknowledging it. It's like, actually, no. There was no two timeline. I was like, okay, we're just going to do that. But I appreciate that because that's what we do in Sports Talk Radio. We don't acknowledge the bad takes, Joe Shasky.